Today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that can be, well, a little bit mind-bending, but stick with us.
Yeah.
It's post-structuralism.
It's a field that can be a bit intimidating, for sure.
It really is.
But it has so much to offer when it comes to how we see the world and ourselves, especially when we talk about gender.
Yes.
One of the fascinating things about post-structuralism is that it really challenges those things we just take for granted, those givens.
Absolutely.
Like we just assume gender is natural, but post-structuralism asks, what if it's not?
Yeah.
It makes us see how these ideas, even like gender, are actually shaped by the language we use,
Right.
by power dynamics, by the culture we live in.
Okay, so to get this, maybe we need to back up a bit.
Yeah.
What came before post-structuralism, which was structuralism?
Right.
Can you help us out here?
Sure. Think of structuralists like detectives.
Okay.
They're looking for the underlying code, the hidden structure of how everything works.
They want to find the meaning of it all.
Right. They believed in these universal systems that shape us.
But then post-structuralism came along and said, hey, those codes and systems, maybe they're not so fixed, not so universal.
So wait, are post-structuralists saying there's no meaning? That it's just chaos? That's a little scary.
Not exactly. No,
Okay.
It's not saying meaning is gone, but that it's not this set thing.
Got it.
It's constructed, it changes, and power plays a huge role.
That actually is kind of empowering.
It is.
We're not just stuck.
Right.
So that brings us to Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, right?
Exactly.
A prime example of post-structuralism looking at gender.
Yeah. Butler takes that post-structuralist lens and deconstructs the ways we think about gender.
Okay.
And the main argument, ready for this, gender is not some fixed thing you're born with. It's
Yeah.
a performance.
Whoa, wait, so we're all just actors putting on a show.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Butler's not saying it's a conscious thing we choose.
Right.
It's more how we're always performing gender
Okay.
through what we do, how we act, dress, even how we talk. So it's like, it's all shaped by what society expects.
Exactly.
And those expectations, we don't even realize they're there most of the time.
It's like breathing, we just do it.
Right.
But Butler wants us to think about it.
To be aware.
Yes, aware of how we're performing.
So we can question those norms.
Exactly, and the power behind them.
Okay, that's the big picture. So let's zoom in.
Okay.
In Gender Trouble, Butler starts by setting the stage.
Right.
And one thing she tackles is this idea of women as a single category. What's going on there?
Well, it's brilliant because it immediately questions one of the core ideas of feminism.
Okay.
This idea that women are one group with shared experiences and goals.
Right.
Butler argues that women, the category itself, isn't this natural thing. It's created and limited by power structures, by language, by cultural norms.
So the foundation of feminism is actually problematic.
It's more about recognizing its limitations.
Got it.
It's not to say we ditch feminism or fighting for women's rights. But we need to see how women can exclude some people.
I see. So assuming a universal woman erases those differences.
Yes.
Differences like race, class, sexuality.
All those factors, exactly.
Like we're trying to fit everyone into a box labeled woman.
And that box just can't contain all the different experiences out there.
And Butler's saying we need to think beyond that.
Yeah, beyond simple categories, see how power creates them.
This is making me rethink a lot of things.
That's the point.
But I want to hear more about this gender as performance idea.
It's a powerful one.
It is, and I'm curious how Butler explains it in the book.
Well, she really goes deep in Chapter 1, Subjects of Sex, Gender, Desire.
Oh.
She unpacks this whole idea of questioning women as the singular subject. And there are some incredible quotes that really drive it home.
So give us a quote that really hit you.
One that stuck with me is, and I'm going to try to get this all out, Butler writes, "The political construction of the subject proceeds with certain legitimating and exclusionary aims, and these political operations are effectively concealed and naturalized by a political analysis that takes juridical structures as their foundation."
Okay, phew, that's a lot.
It is, I know.
Break that down for me.
Basically, she's saying that how we define the subject, in this case women, in our legal and political systems, it's already biased. It leaves some people out.
Okay.
And if we just accept those definitions without questioning them, we're just supporting the systems that made them in the first place.
So related to feminism, are we saying that fighting for women as a group could actually be, like, counterproductive if we don't see the problems with the category itself?
It's not that we shouldn't fight for those rights,
Okay.
but that we need to be very aware of how that label, women, can be limiting and even used to leave certain groups out.
Right, because that universal woman idea ignores the different ways power affects people.
Yeah,
Like a wealthy white woman might experience being a woman very differently from a black trans woman.
exactly. And Butler is pushing us to think critically.
About who is included and excluded.
Yes, and how power shapes our understanding of being a woman.
It's about going deeper than those simple representations.
Right, deconstructing how power creates and keeps gender inequality going.
So we see how Butler challenges this idea of women as one category. But how does this connect back to gender as a performance?
Well, if we accept that women isn't a preset thing,
Yeah.
it opens up the possibility that gender itself isn't fixed.
Well,
It's something we do, something we perform.
and that's where things get really fascinating.
It really is. It really is this idea of gender as performance.
Yeah, and that's what really got me thinking when I first read Butler's work.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did you wrap your head around this whole gender as performance concept?
Well, Butler gives this great analogy. Drag.
Oh, okay.
Think about drag queens for a second. What are they doing?
They're playing with gender, right.
Exactly.
They're exaggerating those traditional masculine and feminine traits, but in a really fun, subversive way.
Yes, and by exaggerating it,
Yeah.
they're showing us how artificial those norms really are. Drag queens show us that gender isn't some deep down essence. It's learned behaviors, expressions, appearances.
It's all a performance.
It is.
Okay, I'm starting to see how drag is such a good example of this.
It is.
It's like holding a mirror up to society and saying, look how ridiculous these gender norms are.
Exactly. And Butler argues we're all performing gender in a way.
Whether we realize it or not.
Right. It's so ingrained we rarely question it.
So you're saying even those everyday things we do,
Yeah.
how we dress, walk, talk, it's all part of this performance.
Absolutely. And by becoming aware of that,
Mm-hmm.
we can start to challenge it.
Okay.
We can choose to perform gender in ways that break those norms, open up more fluid ways of being.
This makes me think about those expectations we put on kids,
Yeah.
even from such a young age. Boys have to man up and hide their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Girls are supposed to be nurturing and caring. That's all part of this, right?
Exactly. And those expectations can be so limiting
They really are.
for everyone, really.
But if we see it as performance,
Yes.
we can start to ask, why are we doing this? Who benefits? Can we do it differently?
Exactly. Those are the questions.
But let's get back to the book.
Okay.
In chapter 1, Butler really dives into questioning women as this singular subject, right?
Yes. And there was that powerful quote.
Oh, yeah. What was it again?
Let me see if I can remember it all. Okay. Butler writes, if the immutable character of sex is contested, perhaps this construct called sex is as culturally constructed as gender. Indeed, perhaps it was always already gender, with the consequence that the distinction between sex and gender turns out to be no distinction at all.
Whoa. Okay, unpack that for me. That's a
I know, right? What she's saying is that even sex, which we think of as biological,
Yeah.
it's also shaped by culture. We can't separate it from the meanings we give it.
So it's not just chromosomes and all that.
Right. It's how we interpret those things.
Okay.
And those interpretations are always seen through culture, language, power.
So this clear line between sex and gender, it gets blurry.
It breaks down when you look closely.
Okay, I'm following. But how does this challenge the traditional view of gender?
Well, we used to think sex was this fixed biological base, and gender was how that was expressed.
Yeah.
But Butler's saying, what if that base, that sex, is itself constructed? What if how we understand sex is already influenced by gender norms?
Mind blown. So it's not biology determining gender, but our understanding of biology is shaped by gender.
Exactly. And this changes how we think about gender identity, gender expression.
Right.
Gender isn't just something we're born with. It's something we're always negotiating, recreating.
Through our interactions with the world.
Yes. And that leads us to another big idea, the heterosexual matrix.
Oh, yeah. How does that fit in?
The heterosexual matrix is key to Butler's critique because she sees it as this system that reinforces these rigid gender norms, limits how we can express gender.
Okay, so it's like this underlying assumption
Yeah.
that there's this natural link between sex, gender, and desire.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example of that in real life?
Think about how we gender babies as soon as they're born.
Okay.
Pink for girls, blue for boys, dolls versus trucks.
Right, and all the things that come with that.
We tell girls they're pretty, boys they're strong. It starts right there.
So we set up these expectations before they even know who they are.
Exactly. And it's reinforced by everything. Family, school, religion, media.
It's like this script we're all supposed to follow.
Based on what sex we're assigned at birth?
And if you deviate from that,
Yeah.
if you're gay, trans, or even just don't fit those traditional holes,
You're seen as different, abnormal.
Exactly. So the heterosexual matrix is about policing gender and sexuality.
It labels anything outside its boundaries as deviant.
But who decides what's natural anyway?
That's Butler's point. It's about power, limiting our freedom to be ourselves.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together.
Gender performance, the heterosexual matrix, it's all connected.
But Butler doesn't just talk about these ideas on their own.
No, she brings in other thinkers.
Yeah.
Freud, Lacan, Foucault, all these big names.
Okay.
But one that's really important for understanding the heterosexual matrix is Claude Lévi-Strauss.
Oh, wasn't he an anthropologist?
Yeah, he's known for this structuralist analysis of kinship, family systems.
I vaguely remember that from school.
One of his big ideas was the incest taboo,
Uh-huh.
this universal rule against certain sexual relationships.
I remember that, but how does Butler connect that to the heterosexual matrix?
Well, she argues the incest taboo isn't just about genetics.
Okay.
It's about maintaining a power dynamic between men and women.
And that ties back to the heterosexual matrix.
Exactly.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure, the incest taboo forbids sex between certain family members, right?
Yeah.
And it's often about gender, like a father can't sleep with his daughter.
Yeah.
This reinforces the idea that men are dominant, women are submissive.
So it's not just biology, it's reinforcing those roles.
Exactly, and those power dynamics are at the heart of the heterosexual matrix.
By saying certain relationships are forbidden,
Yeah.
we then define what's normal based on those rules.
That's a circular thing.
It is. And Butler points out that this taboo is often enforced violently,
Physically and symbolically.
which just strengthens those power dynamics.
Exactly.
So if this is so deeply ingrained, how can we even challenge it?
Butler doesn't offer easy answers.
All right.
She wants us to completely rethink gender and sexuality, deconstruct those categories we take for granted.
It's a tall order.
It is, but I'm curious to hear how Butler talks about resisting, subverting these ideas.
Me too. Where does she go from here?
Well, one key part is how she analyzes the connection between the heterosexual matrix and this incest taboo. And this is where it gets really interesting, because she looks at how our bodies themselves can become sites of subversion.
Okay, I'm definitely hooked now. Tell me more.
It really is fascinating how she ties this together.
Yeah, we've been talking about how deeply ingrained this heterosexual matrix is.
Right.
How it shapes everything about how we see gender and sexuality.
It's powerful.
But Butler doesn't just leave us feeling hopeless, does she?
No, definitely not.
She does give us some ways to think about challenging this system, right?
Absolutely. One way she sees resistance is through these subversive bodily acts.
Okay.
And this is where she moves beyond just language and ideas.
Yeah.
She looks at how our bodies can disrupt these norms we've been talking about.
This is where it gets really interesting for me.
It is.
It's not just about changing how we think, it's about changing how we live in our bodies.
Exactly. Butler says our bodies aren't just shaped by culture. They can be active agents of change.
Okay.
And a key figure she brings in here is Julia Kristeva.
I've heard the name,
Yeah.
but I'm not super familiar with her work. Can you give me a quick rundown?
Sure. Kristeva is known for this concept of the semiotic.
Okay.
It refers to this pre-linguistic stuff like rhythm, sound, sensation that exists before we learn language.
So like before the symbolic order.
Exactly. And she connects the semiotic to the maternal body,
Okay.
this powerful force that disrupts patriarchal structures.
So we're talking about something deeper than language, something more primal.
Yes, very much embodied.
Okay, and Butler uses this to suggest that the maternal body,
Yeah.
with its messy, fluid boundaries,
Right.
it can be seen as resisting those strict gender categories.
It defies that male-female binary.
So like when a baby is just making sounds, playing with sensations before words.
Yes. Or even how a mother's body changes during pregnancy, childbirth.
It challenges those ideas of beauty and control.
Exactly. Butler sees those moments
Those disruptive.
as having the potential to challenge the whole system, even if just for a moment.
It's like cracks in the pavement where weeds keep growing back.
I love that image.
Even though they get stepped on, they remind us that the system isn't perfect.
That there's always resistance
And Butler sees that resistance coming from our bodies.
from those parts of us that don't fit neatly into the categories.
This makes me think of that example Butler talks about, Hercule and Barbin.
Oh, yes, the 19th century hermaphrodite.
It's such a powerful story
It is.
because it shows how male and female just break down when you have a body that doesn't fit.
It challenges the whole system of categorization.
And Butler's arguing that in those moments, those breakdowns,
Yeah.
that's where change can happen.
Exactly. When those categories fail, it opens up space for new ways of thinking about gender
New ways of being.
that don't rely on those binaries.
But it's important to remember that Butler isn't romanticizing this experience.
Right?
She recognizes the pain Herculean went through trying to conform to a system that couldn't handle her.
It's a tragic story, but Butler uses it to show the violence of those norms.
The violence of trying to erase anyone who doesn't fit the mold.
And she ties it back to her critique of binary thinking in general.
That everything has to be either.
Male, female, normal, abnormal, it's all connected.
She sees that kind of thinking as a way to control people.
To silence anyone who's different.
And she calls for a more fluid understanding of gender.
One that recognizes the complexity of being human.
This makes me think about non-binary identities today.
Yes.
People are challenging those categories, demanding recognition for all the ways gender can be expressed.
And Butler's work has been so important for those movements.
It's given people a way to understand how gender is constructed.
And how we can challenge it.
So where does all this leave us? What do we do with all these ideas from gender trouble?
I think Butler wants us to ask some hard questions.
About ourselves, about the world.
Yeah, how do we perform our gender? How are those performances shaped by society?
Did we challenge those norms to create more freedom?
It's like she's giving us a new way to see things.
To see how gender is constructed and the potential for change?
And it's up to each of us to decide how we use that.
How we perform our own gender, what kind of world we want to build.
It's not about finding one right answer.
Right.
It's about constantly questioning, reflecting, creating.
And remember, even small acts of resistance.
Those moments when we break free from those roles.
They can make a difference.
They can.
So to everyone listening, we say, embrace the ambiguity, play with those boundaries, and never stop questioning those norms.
Don't let them define you.
Because the power to change things is within each of us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into gender trouble.
We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did.
And we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, read more of Butler's work.
And find those subversive acts that can make a real difference in the world.